Hey, what's going on, y'all? I appreciate y'all jumping in. We are going to step right into the main meat of the video. We're not going to waste any time. So, is John Kennedy's ad for Louisiana Senate, is it racist? Let's check it out.
Crime is surging in Louisiana. Woke leaders blame the police. I blame the criminals. A mom should not have to look over her shoulder when she's pumping gas. I voted against the early release of violent criminals, and I opposed defunding the police. Look, if you hate cops just because they're cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead. I'm John Kennedy, and I approve this message.
All right. So let's start off just with a little discussion on that topic. He basically said that he's looking out for the victim. That's how it comes across. He's looking out for the victim. But let's look at what his opponent had to say about this ad. Let's take a listen to his opponent.
Here's more.
Now, this here is Louisiana politics at its best.
If you hate cops just because they're cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead. I'm John Kennedy, and I approve this message.
But it's also racist as hell, and he ain't say nothing about opioid addicts, meth addicts, none of that other stuff, because he was trying to talk about a specific subset of people that he doesn't give a damn about serving in Louisiana since he's been elected. We need leaders who have real solutions to the problem in our communities, not cowards like John Kennedy who drop one-liners and do nothing on the job. You're a piece of trash.
Yeah. All right. So I'd love to know what you guys think. So put your comments in the chat section if you're listening to me live, or put your comments down in the comment section if you're watching this later on. Do you think what John Kennedy said, do you think his ad for Louisiana Senate, do you think that was racist? Give me a yes or no. I'd love to know what you think. So what I decided to do, I was looking, first of all, his opponent, I was trying to see what his perspective on crime was overall, Gary Chambers. I was trying to see if he had posted anything in recent history in regard to defund or abolish the police. I wasn't able to find anything. But what I did do was did some research on Louisiana and their issues in the area of crime, to get a better gauge of what's being said here, as opposed to just assuming that someone making a reference to crackheads automatically qualifies them as being racist. So what we try to do here, as always with Code Red Conversations, is dig deeper. We try to push aside all the rhetoric, all the agenda pushing, and see what's really going on. So let's do a little research, shall we? Let me pull up what I found. Pull up what I found in regard to what's going on, the state of crime in Louisiana. Let me share this little bit of data here with you first and foremost. All right, I'll read it to you. Well, actually, I'll let the video play for itself, and then I'll read whatever they don't discuss, whatever they don't talk about. And this came out on the 6th of October, as a matter of fact.
And is in custody while a constable and a landlord are recovering after getting shot when they tried to serve an eviction notice.
The shooting happened this morning on Coronet Court in New Orleans East, but the search for the suspect stretched all the way into Mid-City. We have crews in both locations tonight working to learn the latest on what happened at that apartment complex and afterwards.
We'll begin in Mid-City, where the suspect was found.
All right, let me just read the article because I'm not sure how far they get into the main meat. Again, this was posted October 6th in 2022. Louisiana ranks 5th in violent crime nationwide. 5th. This is the city where the debate or the run is going on. The election is taking place where Chambers and Kennedy, the two individuals involved in this whole discussion, where Chambers referred to Kennedy as being racist. Let's see what's really going on here. And he called him racist because he said, if you hate cops, just because they're cops, call a crackhead. But it was primarily in relation to the ridiculous defund the police movement and the damage that has caused to the victims. So let's, first place again, we're looking at Louisiana and their crime. A new study shows that Louisiana is one of the top states in the nation for violent crime. However, the new data from the FBI gathered by law enforcement experts at Jorge Vela Law shows that Louisiana ranks 5th for highest crime rate nationwide with 639 violent crimes for every 100,000 people. Just ahead of the Bayou State, Arkansas, Tennessee, New Mexico, and interestingly enough, Alaska. Alaska rang in with the highest rate of violent crime of 837 per 100,000. Which is pretty shocking to me. I never would have assumed that to be the case. I don't know. What do y'all think about that? And they go on and talk about some of the other places, other states. The report says most of the victims of these crimes were between the ages of 20 and 29, with the relationship to the offender being unknown. However, it's important to note that the New Orleans Police Department, Baton Rouge Police Department, Shreveport Police, and Lafayette Police all neglected to report any of their stats to the FBI. The FBI also alerted law enforcement agencies that it has a new system that requires different steps to report these crime stats. Now, that information has basically been across the nation as far as claiming that or demonstrating where the FBI says that they have a new way of calculating crime data. That's something that came about maybe over the last year or so, and that there are a lot of agencies who hadn't fully reported on their crime data because of the changes that were needed. But based on this information, they were ranked 5th. I can only imagine if they had received more information where their ranking might be. Who knows? They could have been ranked number 1. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I've seen some more recent data that demonstrates that their ranking is even higher than 5th as of over the last year or so. But don't quote me on that. I could be off with that. Okay, so we see that clearly there is a violent crime issue in Louisiana. I don't think anyone could even try to, I'm sure somebody out there might try, but I think it would be a lost cause to attempt to debate that issue. So let's go even further. Let's look at who the victims are. Who's being victimized in a lot of these locations across the nation, in particularly in Louisiana. Okay? Because that's at the gist of everything that was said. John Kennedy was called a racist because he used the term crackhead, but the totality of his argument, I would believe, was ignored. And I think that this report demonstrates that the most. Let's check it out.
At least 16 U.S. cities set homicide records last year. New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago amongst those that saw a huge rise in killings. But beyond the statistics, who are the victims in these tragedies? Well, Matt Finn dug into the numbers. He is live in Los Angeles to tell us what he found. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Dana. Fox News submitted Freedom of Information requests to those 16 cities that saw homicide records, also to the big three, New York, Chicago, and L.A. And the data we analyzed show that overwhelmingly black males were the #1 demographic killed in those cities last year. In this
Okay, who was the overall #1 demographic killed? Let's see if we can pull that up again.
Records, also to the big three, New York, Chicago, and LA. And the data we analyzed show that overwhelmingly black males were the #1 demographic killed in those cities last year. In the city of Chicago, 648 of the 797 homicide victims were black.
Wow.
Also last year, 36 times a 27-year-old black person was killed in Chicago. Black males, also the leading demographic killed in cities like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Columbus, Ohio, St. Paul, Minnesota, Atlanta, Georgia, and Louisville, Kentucky. And here.
Okay, now what are some of these other cities? Let's rewind that again. See if we can get those cities
killed in Chicago
that he referenced.
Black males, also the leading demographic killed in cities like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Columbus, Ohio, St. Paul, Minnesota, Atlanta, Georgia, and Louisville, Kentucky. And
Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Very interesting. Very interesting. I don't think anybody's shocked by that, but let's continue.
here in LA, Hispanic males were the most killed. This city has a higher Hispanic population than black. And we sat down with Cortland Bridges. Her 28-year-old daughter, Kai Thomas, was shot and killed in Venice Beach in December of 2020. Two of her alleged killers were just arrested. Bridges tells us her daughter was not a gang member, instead a loving mother, and she describes the pain of losing her child.
It's an undescribable pain. It's a piercing pain that I don't think any mother should have to experience. But this crime is horrible, and there's no accountability. The judicial system is failing our children.
We also spoke to a Los Angeles prosecutor who works in DA George Gascon's office. He blames the soft on crime policies here in Los Angeles and other cities across the country.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Definitely.
People that are really being affected by these types of crimes are people of color. 50%, since basically the early 90s, 50% of victims of homicide have been primarily black men.
And sadly, Dana, the data shows so many children were killed across the
Let
country.
me rewind that a bit.
Of homicide types of crimes are people of color. 50%, since basically the early 90s, 50% of victims of homicide have been primarily black men.
And what makes that even more significant is when we understand that black males only make up 6% of the U.S. population, 6%, but yet we manage to make up over 50% of the victims in violent crime. And sadly, we're usually around high 40s, 50% of those who commit violent crimes. And that's a stat that a lot of people don't like talking about, but it's a reality. But right now, we're focusing primarily on the fact that in these areas, especially in Louisiana, the primary victims that, first of all, there's a high crime rate, high violent crime rate, and that the primary victims are black. So if Senator Kennedy makes the statement that where his primary argument is referencing the reality of violent crime and how the victim is oftentimes overlooked, but yet there was a push to defund the police in his state. Somehow, along the way, he's made out to be a racist. Now, I don't know much else about him. I've watched many of his video clips, and man, Kennedy is very entertaining. He makes some very wise and sharp quips and stuff like that. Dude will crack you up. He'll make you laugh in a heartbeat. So if he's ever said anything controversial, I can't say that I've ever heard it. But everything that I've seen over more recent years, he seems to be pretty solid. And in light of all of those people in our recent history, I'm talking about over the last few years, who have pushed for a radical transformation when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to criminal justice in general. I'm talking about obviously the defunding and the move to abolish the police in some areas, the bail and jail and prison reform that basically opened the floodgates and allowed all types of offenders out early, or that has been very soft on crime, allowing all kinds of all manner of crimes to be released on little to no bail, you would think that you would want someone who is, regardless of his skin color, regardless of where his politics, well, I can't say regardless of his politics, because ultimately there's some people who have, there's only one side primarily who pushed to abolish the police. Let's be honest. Let's be real with ourselves. Anybody who's talking about defunding the police, there might have been a few outliers here and there that were Republican, but overwhelmingly it was a Democratic Party move, idea. And they were the ones that supported it overwhelmingly. And now what they're attempting to do in a lot of places, even though there's some who are holding on for dear life who still promote this nonsensical idea, but the vast majority of them are trying to distance themselves from the defund the police movement because they've seen the results of it. Crime has shot up across the nation, almost everywhere. But in particularly, as I often mention, in these leftist cities, in these progressive cities, those foolish individuals who thought that defunding the police, that somehow the goodness of man would somehow just rise up and they would just be good once the police and the system, the court system and the legal system just stopped locking them up. Somehow the greater good would come about, would rise up. It's insane. Insane. Let me reference this comment right here from Michelle. How you doing, Michelle? Good to see you. Secure the border. Crime is going up. More drugs are coming in. Drugs are a big reason for increases in homicide. Absolutely. There's no question about that. When we open the border, when we understand that drugs and sex trafficking are primarily issues that come from the other side of the border, and when we have a very porous, a basically wide open border, and God only knows who's being allowed to come in, we should not be shocked when we see an increase in crime. And you just stack that on to all the other things that I referenced earlier. All the other things that I referenced earlier, the push to be soft on crime throughout our nation. Combine those things and you have an explosion. And it is nothing good. Nothing good comes from it at all. Let me see here. Look at some of these comments here. What you got here, Mark? Good to see you. The game today is to try to label everything racist instead of engaging honestly. Absolutely. And I would argue that the reason, and I don't think you'll debate me on this, the reason they do it is because it is routinely effective, especially with the black vote. You label someone or something as racist, and you get everyone on the bandwagon, everybody who on your party or every supporter that you have, and you have the mainstream media outlets just pushing it out there, people will assume it to be true and they will not question it. They just won't. Because oftentimes to question it makes you look like a sellout. And there are too many people who are afraid of that label being put on them. They're terrified of that label to be put on them. And then I can think of back in the day when I was a Democrat, I used to just assume the party narrative was factual without doing any checking. Because all of my life I was under the assumption that, and I've mentioned this before, that anything on the right or anything slightly right of being a Democrat was a racist. They were primarily motivated by race. And it wasn't until I got much older, I'm talking about, 10, 11 years ago, where I finally started to understand things and see things differently because I started to do my homework. And I started to do research outside of my little square of watching MSNBC and CNN. I started reading books. I started looking at different resources that challenged the way I thought. So just to slap, it's easy to put that racist title on people. It's real easy, it's real simple, and it doesn't take much thinking. And unfortunately, it's been proven to be extremely effective. It's really sad, but that's where we are. What's up, Lon? Good to see you, brother. They've got nothing else. They truly don't. And that's the unfortunate reality. The unfortunate side of it is the fact that very few people research it. And a lot of times their arguments are based in emotion. So if you can motivate someone, I heard it said, I can't recall who it was. I heard Eric July make this reference, or he's quoted as saying something along those lines, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but how it references, and I'm sure he wasn't the only one who said it. I'm sure it came way before him. But how difficult it is to have someone change their perspective when they reach that perspective primarily based on emotion. So it's difficult to try to rationalize with someone who's reached a certain point of view based on the fact that this is how they feel. And those feelings are very intense. Doesn't take much. If you just type in John Kennedy's ad on YouTube, or if you Google it, you'll come up with all kinds of articles from quote unquote legitimate media sources, media outlets that basically just call his ad racist. They just flat out call it racist. And when you read them, they don't take the time to try to understand his point of view. Nowadays, the vast majority of media outlets are so biased, it's pathetic, completely pathetic. They are a propaganda wing of the Democratic Party. It's just the reality of it. It's rare. You have to search hard. I had to go through, I was doing some research yesterday. I can't recall what topic I was looking up. But my goodness, I had to go through article, I had to go to page after page on Google. And I use DuckDuckGo, and even DuckDuckGo isn't necessarily the greatest search engine anymore. I've been looking for various search engines that will give me what I'm looking for, not what they want me to believe. And Result Hunter was a search engine that I found that was very informative, that would give information from a more conservative perspective. That's one that I found that still works. A lot of them don't work anymore. But I had to go through page after page after page in order to find information that gave a balanced perspective, or didn't give a perspective that, or the first few articles weren't from CNN or the Washington Post or the New York Times or some of these other outlets. It's, if you type in something, let's say it's about Donald Trump, or let's say it's about Hillary Clinton emails, you're not going to get exactly what you're looking for. You're going to get the propaganda first and foremost. That's just how it is. And they know exactly what they're doing. Don't confuse me with the facts. Yeah, I mean, what Ben Shapiro said, the facts don't care about your feelings, but the reality is, when it comes down to politics, facts can basically be irrelevant. When, as I just mentioned previously, when someone is motivated primarily by how you feel. Take, for instance, let's look at a few points. All the things that we've learned over the last couple of years in regard to the jab, being vaccinated or not, all the things that we've learned, there's so many things that it was claimed originally that were conspiracy theories. So many of those things have panned out to be completely legitimate. So many. It's pathetic. I was watching NTD News, Nora Tango David News. That's not actually what it says, but that's just the phonetic alphabet. And they were talking about a article from the New York Times. And I think the article was talking about some of the voter machines that were found to be problematic. And they said that True the Vote, the organization True the Vote, they're associated with the Dinesh D'Souza film 2000 Mules. But the organization True the Vote had stated that some of these machines were believed to have been taking data and storing it in China. And they said that that was just a conspiracy theory. But it was, a week ago, where the executive of this voting machine company was charged with storing data in China from U.S. voting machines. And then the New York Times had to go back and, not retract, but they posted something in there saying, just basically, they didn't change the article at all. They just posted something in there saying that, well, it's the CEO was charged with the crime, this and that. They're still investigating it, but they left the article up just as is. Hardly any accountability whatsoever. But there have been so many times over the last few years where things that were thought to be conspiratorial have panned out to be true. Gain of function, testing on. I mean, I can go on and on. I don't want to make this thing all about, I don't want to bring up the jab and have YouTube coming after me or whatever. But I've learned over the years that when people have a specific agenda, in particularly those who, a lot of these godless folks, let's be honest, a lot of these folks who they may proclaim to have some form of Christian faith or something like that, but to see it actually worked out, very rare. Well, it's very rare all over, even in the church, honestly. But when people have shown themselves to be enemies of the church, enemies of God by their actions, by their policies, by the things that they stand for, I've come to the point to where I don't put anything past anybody. I don't put anything past anyone. And I truly believe that nowadays you have to, if there's an accusation out there of something pretty horrendous, I don't just willy-nilly just cast it aside. I don't do that. I sit back and I'm like, I mean, unless, I don't look at myself as being some form of a conspiracy theorist. The earth is flat and, we never landed on the moon or some of that other stuff. But when it comes down to politics and human nature, my first impression is to be skeptical at times, especially when you're dealing with people who reject God or who have proven themselves to be enemies of the church, enemies who are promoters of sin, who are promoters of immorality. I assume that it's more likely that that's the reality. If they're accused of something evil or a crime, although I do understand that in our nation it's innocent until proven guilty, I'm also a firm believer that by our fruits you will know them, as Jesus said, by their fruits. And if you demonstrate a history, a track record of doing evil things and supporting evil, why would it be too hard to believe that, yeah, that's pretty much where you still stand? But those are just my thoughts. Now, you know what? I'm going to keep today's episode short. I appreciate y'all joining me. And do me a favor. If you appreciate Code Red Conversations, please like, subscribe, share my content as I try to reach a broader audience. I try to bring more light and eyes to the subject matter that we'll be addressing. Look for me tomorrow, y'all. I'll be addressing a few other issues, some things that have been taking place in our country. Throughout the course of this week, I plan on doing a deeper dive into not the San Antonio. I posted a video. Check out some of my more recent content. I posted a video on the San Antonio shooter, those people, police shooting in San Antonio. I posted a video where Stephen A. Smith talks about the violent crime across our nation, and particularly in New York, and those goofy folks in the New York subway system wearing those green suits. If you hadn't seen those videos, please check those out and share them with your friends and family so they can get more reach. And I plan on having some deeper discussions. I plan on doing a deep dive into the Phoenix active shooter from last month and to look at what his motivations were. So you may be hearing from me tomorrow or the day after on that topic. I'm hoping to go tomorrow. But again, once again, I appreciate you guys being with me and supporting my content. I'm keeping it short today. As always, much love and stay safe. God bless. And make sure you join the conversation.